Simon, we had the vice presidential debate this week, and I would love to hear your impressions of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was my initial impression, and as I wrote in Hopium Chronicles this week, was I was just overwhelmed by the scale of the lying from JD Vance. And it's possible that because I've been in this business for so long and I know a lot of the policy issues that were debated and discussed last night, that I was a little bit more sort of attuned or aware of the scale and intentionality of the lying. I mean, it's very clear that what the Vance and Trump campaign did last night was they took advantage of the idea that there was going to be no fact checking, and they invented crazy stories and things to deflect from their extremism of the danger that they represent to the country. It was sort of a fable. JD Vance came and told us these stories of which they were almost entirely untrue inventions, way beyond lying. We don't even have the right words in English to describe this kind of fictional fabulism that we saw last night. And it was just on such a shocking scale, to be honest. And I'll give you one example, right? The exchange about guns coming from Mexico.
The gross majority, close to 90%, and some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago.
Just so everybody understands, there are no guns made in Mexico. Guns are illegal in Mexico. All the guns in Mexico that the cartels have come from the United States and come from unscrupulous dealers of weapons, often unlicensed on the border, that make a living selling American weapons into the cartels in Mexico. This idea that he invented an entire story about how the gun violence in the United States is due to guns, American guns that were purchased legally and then somehow smuggled back into the United States. I've been working on border and immigration issues for 20 years. I've never heard anything remotely as crazy as that. And they had to sit there and practice that. Like, they had to invent that story because it's fundamentally untrue. And it was, again, a reinforcement of the core need for them to demonize the other. Somehow the gun violence problem in America is due to immigrants, right? Like, the whole thing was just so shocking. And so, I think that shame on CBS, frankly, for allowing this to happen. And I can't believe that 2 out of the 3 debates that we've had so far have been, the Trump campaign was successful at getting major networks to agree not to challenge anything that they said during the debates. It was disappointing for us and a sort of disservice to the American people.
Well, I actually think that was one of the, most viral moments to come out of the debate was when Margaret Brenner did actually fact check JD Vance, and he stopped and he said,
just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Right. Temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and
that was a pretty important moment, and it was a pretty clarifying moment, I think, for audiences who were watching, because it demonstrated the terms of which he and the Trump campaign are willing to engage, right? Where they are not fact checked on their lies and the stories that they weave out of thin air to build a case for their extremist policies. And also just it touches on sort of the state of media today. I actually, I don't disagree with you about the format of the debates and the agreements that were made at the corporate level with the campaigns. I think there's a lot to dig in there. But I do want to give a shout out to Nora and Margaret, the moderators of the debate, because I do think that they did an exceptional job with the format and the rules of the road they were kind of given.
Yeah,
and Margaret stepping outside of those rules to actually ensure that a fact was given to refute JD's lies in that moment showed him for his true colors. And I think, a lot of the quick takeaways were that it was either, a tie or JD Vance won because of how slick he was. I think, he had an easier job than Tim Walz and took that job seriously to introduce himself for the first time on his terms to the American people, since most people who know who JD Vance is, frankly, know based on memes of really egregious, horrific, misogynist things he said over the course of his very short political career. But I do think that some of the most poignant moments in the debate last night, at least for me, were when there were moments that chipped away at the facade he had carefully crafted and curated to present himself as. Because we know that JD Vance is a liar. He is a chameleon, right? He is someone who likened Trump to Hitler and is now his running mate and his most staunch defender to the national public. And we watched him in real time weave in completely false narratives, which, by the way, he has also admitted to.
Right.
The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to,
But it wasn't just a meme,
create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana.
So the bar is just in hell, really, when it comes to accountability for the truth in our politics today. But I do think that we were able to see some glimpses of his true colors. And it was all those moments where we didn't, and we saw the facade he wanted to project that showed some level of competence and strength.
Yeah, and I think to, play the role of Tara here for a second, I think the thing that is going to come out of the debate in the aftermath, given that there was probably very low viewership and that many people will be forming their impression of what happened based on moments, as you call them, that we will all get to see on social media and through our networks. There was that moment where he sort of said, "What are you doing fact checking me? I thought I was able to come up here and lie with impunity." It was a shocking moment, right, where he broke out of character. But the other one was the exchange where he refused to condemn insurrection and commit to the full, the integrity of our democracy.
And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
And that's going to be the clip, I think, that over the next few days will really define this debate. And it was one that was devastating for Vance. He seemed so cavalier in his dismissal of the importance of, agreeing to the basic terms of when a candidate wins an election, right? They get to win and you don't contest and try to overturn the election results. And it was really, for what was a very kind of sure-footed performance by him, this was a catastrophic moment for him politically that's going to haunt him, I think, not just in this election, but for many years to come, because of the way that he answered it. It wasn't just his answer. It was this sort of cavalier, like, I'm looking forward. Like, I don't really care that, we try to overturn the election before, as if it was unimportant, right? In a democracy, it's the greatest political crime you can commit in a democracy to try to overturn an election. So I do think that this is going to become definitional. And the campaign, already had out on, Wednesday morning, they already had an ad out using this clip, and it's all over the internet already. And so, hats off again to the campaign. The Harris-Walz campaign has been really pioneered rapid response and quick response, video-based quick response, in a way that has really transformed our politics this cycle. And I'm really proud of them for this. I mean, this has been a big innovation, and I think they've been able to really help define moments in ways that I think was harder for older campaigns to do in this new media environment.
Yeah, no, they absolutely understand that the impact of the debate is not on the people that are watching at home on television. There was actually this amazing meme that was going viral, and certainly my circles, of a Venn diagram, but it's just two circles standing on their own, where the one on the left is, like rabid, hand-wringing political junkies obsessed with this election and biting their nails over the election. And then the other circle on its own is undecided voters. And there's just no cross of the the two for the debate watchers, because it's fairly true, right? And yet the clips are what matter. They reach a ton more people who don't tune into traditional media, which are the voters who will choose the election. Whether they're younger or they're older passive news consumers, they're not watching on television, they're not watching live. It's what clips reach them in their feeds. And that one in particular, I think, is really damning. And for folks who did see any of the, the more projecting JD Vance, and where he, projected compassion, projected empathy in some of his answers, especially related to abortion, which was particularly sickening for me to watch, given his position on abortion, for him to play that hypocrisy, really using, if it is a true story, a real woman's personal story to make himself look more compassionate on an issue he is not compassionate on. If you had seen that moment and didn't know anything about JD Vance, but then you did see the moment where he would not agree that the election was not stolen in 2020, then where you saw it all fall apart. You saw the projected version that he wanted to show America fall apart, because when push comes to shove, he actually will do whatever Trump wants him to do. He is a shill for Trump, and essentially for whoever Trump is a shill for, mainly Putin comes to mind. And I think that was really an important moment, because you did see him struggle. You saw him visually, physically kind of struggle as he tried to worm his way out of that question and answer.
Yeah, and it was surprising given that he had to know it was coming, right? I mean, this was one of the obvious questions that was going to happen. But, listen, I think politically, they did, it was not a good night for Trump and Vance, because they didn't achieve their fundamental objective in the debate, which is that they have to change the trajectory of the election that they're losing. And that didn't happen in the debate.